The conference room stretched wider than any building on Earth. Beings from across the galaxy filled the space, each one representing civilizations older than human history. Some floated in containers of liquid. Others existed as clouds of particles held together by force fields. A few looked almost normal, with 2 arms and 2 legs, but their skin shifted colors with their thoughts. The human representative stood in the center of it all, feeling very small and very alone. Her name did not matter here. What mattered was that she spoke for all of humanity, and these ancient beings had already decided humans were not worth their time. "Your species wants to join the Galactic Federation," one of the aliens said. Its body looked like living crystal, catching light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. "But what can you offer? You have no special abilities. Your bodies are weak. You live such short lives." The human took a deep breath. She had prepared for this moment for months, studying every species in the Federation, learning their histories and capabilities. But standing here, surrounded by beings who could tear apart atoms with their minds or live for thousands of years, her prepared speech felt hollow. "We offer something you have lost," she said finally. "We offer the ability to never give up." Several aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. The crystal being's colors shifted to something that looked like amusement. Determination? Many species have determination. The Krell fought for 300 years to defend their home world. The synthesis can repair any injury to their bodies. What makes human determination special? The human representative walked slowly around the circle, meeting the eyes of those who had them. "Let me tell you a story. 200 years ago, before we reached the stars, there was a man on Earth who got sick. The doctors told him his muscles would stop working. First his legs, then his arms, then everything except his mind. They said he had 2 years left." She paused, letting the silence build. This man was a scientist. He studied the universe, trying to understand how everything worked. When he got sick, everyone expected him to give up, to spend his last 2 years with his family, making peace with death. But he did not give up. Asked another alien, this one looking like a mass of tentacles floating in zero gravity. No, he lived for 55 more years. His body failed completely. He could only move his eyes. He needed machines to breathe, to eat, to do everything. But his mind stayed sharp. And in those 55 years, trapped in a body that did not work, he changed our understanding of the universe. He wrote books using just his eyes to control a computer. He gave lectures. He never stopped working, never stopped thinking, never surrendered to his disease. The crystal being's colors shifted again, this time to something harder to read. One exceptional individual. An outlier in your population. One of billions, the human corrected. "Let me tell you about a woman who was born without the ability to walk. In her time, we could not fix such problems easily. People told her what she could not do her entire childhood. Could not run, could not climb, could not explore. So she taught herself to walk on her hands. She made her arms stronger than most people's legs. And then she climbed the highest mountain on our planet. When people asked why, she said it was because everyone told her it was impossible." The human continued, her voice growing stronger. "Let me tell you about the researchers who spent 30 years trying to cure a disease that killed children. They failed over and over, watched kids die while they worked. But they never stopped. Let me tell you about the explorer who got trapped in the frozen part of our world, alone, with no way to call for help. He survived 9 months by eating anything he could find, then walked 500 kilometers through ice and snow to reach safety. These are your greatest heroes?" Asked an alien that looked like living smoke, constantly shifting and reforming. "No," the human said quietly. "These are normal people. Our heroes are the ones who fight battles nobody sees. The parent who works at 3 different jobs to feed their children. The student who takes 10 years to learn what others learn in 4, never giving up despite failing again and again. The person who wakes up every morning fighting their own mind, their own sadness or fear, choosing to keep living even when everything feels hopeless. The room had grown quiet. Even the aliens who had been moving constantly had stopped to listen. You have incredible abilities, the human continued. You can regenerate lost limbs. You can live for thousands of years. You can read minds, bend space, see in dimensions we cannot imagine. But somewhere along the way, you forgot what it means to truly struggle. You forgot that the hardest battles are not fought with weapons or powers. They are fought inside, every single day, by ordinary beings choosing to continue when continuing seems impossible. A new alien spoke up, one that looked vaguely like an insect, but the size of a small car. This species had conquered 40 star systems through pure military force. These are just words. How do we know humans are truly different from other species? Many claim to be special. The human representative nodded, expecting this challenge. Then test us. Give us a problem you have given up on. Show us a battle you have already lost. Send us to face something you decided was impossible to defeat. And we will show you what it means when humans refuse to surrender. The insect alien's many eyes focused on her with new interest. You would volunteer for a suicide mission just to prove a point? It would only be suicide if we gave up, the human replied. And humans do not give up. We might fail. We will probably fail. But we will fail trying everything possible and some things that seem impossible. We will fail forward, learning from every mistake, adapting to every setback. And maybe, just maybe, we will succeed where you could not. The crystal being spoke again, its colors now a swirling mix of many emotions. You understand that if we test you this way, many humans will likely die? Yes, the human said simply. And they will volunteer anyway. Because humans do not measure success by whether we avoid death. We measure it by whether we stayed true to our purpose. Whether we fought the good fight. Whether we refused to surrender, even when surrender would have been easier. She looked around the room one more time. You want to know what humanity offers the galaxy? We offer the species that looks at impossible odds and sees a challenge instead of a dead end. We offer beings who have made an art form of turning weakness into strength, who find purpose in struggle itself. You have forgotten that the most dangerous opponent is not the one who cannot be killed, but the one who refuses to stay down. The aliens began talking among themselves in languages that hurt human ears to hear. The representative stood quietly, knowing her fate and humanity's future were being decided. She had spoken the truth as she knew it. Now she could only wait. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the crystal being spoke for the group. We will consider your request, but first, you will have your test. We will send you to a place we abandoned long ago, a battle we lost. If humanity can't succeed where we failed, we will reconsider your application to join the Federation. The human representative bowed her head slightly, accepting the terms. She did not ask for details about the mission. She did not try to negotiate better conditions. She simply said, "When do we leave?" And in that moment, the aliens began to understand that humans might actually be as different as they claimed. 3 months after the meeting with the Galactic Federation, a human ship arrived at the edge of what everyone called the dead zone. The ship was small compared to the massive vessels the other species used. It carried only 200 humans and weapons that seemed almost primitive compared to alien technology. Other species had sent ships to watch from a safe distance. They expected to witness humanity's first and final lesson in galactic warfare. Some had even started preparing reports about how the humans died, wanting to document the moment for their history files. The captain of the human ship stood looking at the scanner displays. The numbers told a simple story. They were about to enter a region of space filled with creatures called the Swarm. These creatures had destroyed 400 worlds 600 years ago. The Federation had sent their best warships and lost 70% of them in the first battle. They had run the numbers, calculated the odds, and decided the fight was mathematically impossible to win on, so they had left. Sealed off the entire sector. Abandoned billions of people to their fate. It was the logical choice, the smart choice. But it was also surrender, and the Federation had lived with that shame for 6 centuries. The Swarm has multiplied since the Federation left, one of the crew members said, reading the data. There are millions of them now. Maybe billions. Our ship will be overwhelmed in less than an hour once we cross into their territory. The captain nodded slowly. She was young for such responsibility, barely 30 years old. But she had volunteered for this mission, knowing exactly what it meant. Everyone on the ship had. Begin the approach, she ordered. The ship moved forward, crossing the invisible line into the dead zone. Within minutes, the Swarm found them. They came in waves. Each creature was small, about the size of a human fist, but there were so many of them they blocked out the stars. They moved together like a single living thing, millions of bodies acting as one mind. They had evolved to be perfect killing machines, adapting to any weapon, learning from every defense. Shields failing, someone called out. They are breaking through faster than we predicted. 70% power. 60. 50. The alien observers watched from their safe distance, already writing their reports. The humans had lasted 18 minutes. That was actually impressive, given the odds. Now they would die, and the galaxy would move on. But the human ship did something strange. Instead of firing all its weapons, instead of trying to run, it started broadcasting. Not distress signals, but something else entirely. Music, stories, mathematical equations that had no military purpose. Random information from human culture, transmitted in every direction at once. What are they doing? One of the alien observers asked. Have they lost their minds? Then something happened that no one expected. Parts of the Swarm stopped attacking. Not all of them, just small sections here and there. They seemed confused, trying to process the information the humans were sending. The Swarm operated on perfect logic. Every action served survival. Every behavior had a purpose. They had never encountered information that served no purpose at all. Music that made no sense. Stories about things that never happened. Equations that calculated nothing useful. Shields at 30%, the crew member reported. But Section 7 of the Swarm has stopped attacking us. They appear to be analyzing the transmissions. The captain allowed herself a small smile. The Federation had tried to fight the Swarm with logic. Better weapons, better tactics, better strategy. But the Swarm could adapt to logic. What they could not adapt to was chaos. And humans had spent thousands of years creating art and music and stories that served no logical purpose. Humans were very good at being illogical. The ship pushed deeper into the dead zone, still broadcasting its strange payload. More sections of the Swarm began to malfunction, their hive mind struggling with information that broke all their rules, but it did not last. The Swarm was good at adapting. Within a few hours, they learned to filter out the human transmissions. The attack resumed with even greater intensity. Shields at 10%, came the report. Hull breaches on multiple decks. We have casualties. The alien observers prepared to watch the humans die. But then something happened that made no sense. The human ship broke apart. Not from damage. By design. What had looked like one vessel was actually dozens of smaller pods, each containing a few crew members. They scattered in different directions, each broadcasting different signals, each using different tactics. They divided their forces, an alien observer said, confused. That makes no tactical sense. The swarm will destroy them one by one. But the swarm faced a new problem. Their collective intelligence worked by making group decisions. When facing one threat, they responded with perfect coordination. When facing dozens of different threats moving unpredictably, their coordination broke down. One human pod flew straight into the largest cluster of swarm creatures. Then it exploded, destroying millions of them. But it also destroyed the pod and everyone inside. "They are killing themselves," another observer said. "Why would they do that?" But the humans understood something the aliens had forgotten. Sometimes winning requires sacrifice. Every pod that destroyed itself did so at a specific location, creating gaps in the swarm's coordination. The remaining pods used these gaps to push deeper into the dead zone. Days passed. The human pods kept fighting. When the swarm learned to predict their explosion patterns, the humans switched tactics. They released modified bacteria that interfered with swarm reproduction. When the swarm adapted to that, the humans tried something else. How are they still operational? One of the alien military commanders asked. Our model said they would all be dead in the first day. They have been fighting for 40 days with no supplies, no reinforcements. Most of their pods should not even be able to function anymore. One of the human pods had lost its shields completely. Its hull was torn open in multiple places. The life support was failing, but it kept moving, kept fighting, kept pushing toward the center of the dead zone. Inside that damaged pod, a young engineer worked desperately to keep the systems running. She had not slept in 5 days. Her hands shook from exhaustion as she tried to repair damaged circuits. Around her, the other crew members performed their duties despite injuries that would have killed most alien species. Why? She whispered to herself, connecting another wire. Why do we keep going when everything says we should stop? The pod commander, bleeding from a head wound that no one had time to treat properly, heard her question. He smiled despite the pain. Because we are human. That is reason enough. By day 60, only 12 human pods remained functional. They had reached the heart of the dead zone, where a massive structure pulsed with the collective intelligence of the entire swarm. The structure was the size of a small planet, a living biological computer that controlled trillions of swarm creatures. The alien observers watched in disbelief. The 12 pods, each barely holding together, positioned themselves around this massive structure. They cannot possibly think they can destroy that, an observer said. It would require more explosive power than their entire original fleet possessed. But the humans had not come to destroy it with explosives. Inside the lead pod, the mission commander looked at the faces of the survivors on her screen. 63 humans remained alive from the original 200. Every single one showed signs of extreme exhaustion and injury. And everyone was ready to finish what they started. Final phase, the commander transmitted to all pods. Everyone knows what to do. If you want to back out, no one will think less of you. We have already proven our point. Not a single person responded to that offer. They had not come this far to stop before the end. The pods began their final approach. The swarm structure sensed the threat and released everything it had. Millions of creatures swarmed toward the human vessels, but the pods did not try to defend themselves. Instead, they opened their airlocks. The humans, wearing basic pressure suits, began launching themselves directly at the structure. They were not using escape pods or any kind of vehicle. They were simply jumping into space, using small propulsion packs to guide themselves. What are they doing? An alien commander shouted. They are exposing themselves to vacuum. The swarm creatures attacked the humans in open space. Several people were consumed within seconds. But for every human that fell, 2 more reached the structure's surface. They were carrying packages, devices strapped to their suits. The first human to reach the surface immediately began drilling into the organic material. Around her, other humans provided cover. using their own bodies as shields. She planted her package deep into the structure and activated it. Nothing exploded. The alien observers waited for a detonation that never came. Their weapons failed, one observer said. This whole mission was for nothing. But then the structure shuddered. Not from an explosion, but from something else entirely. And the aliens watching began to understand that humans had one more trick to play. The package the human had planted in the swarm structure began to work, but not in any way the alien observers expected. It did not explode or release poison or emit some kind of destructive radiation. Instead, it started broadcasting directly into the structure's neural network. The swarm's collective intelligence received a transmission and tried to process it. What it received was not battle data or tactical information. It was human memories. A mother sitting beside a hospital bed for 3 days without sleep, holding her sick child's hand. A man with damaged legs climbing stairs every morning, refusing to give up his independence, even though it took him an hour to reach the top. A woman forcing herself into deep water every single day, despite being terrified, training for years to become a rescue swimmer. A child spending a decade learning to read, their brain working differently than others, never giving up despite the frustration. More humans reached the structure's surface, planting more packages. Each one contained thousands of human memories. Not victories or achievements, but struggles. Silent battles fought by ordinary people who refused to surrender to their circumstances. The swarm's intelligence tried to analyze this information. It looked for patterns, for logic, for purpose. But there was none. The memories showed beings choosing difficulty over ease. They showed humans spending enormous energy for no survival advantage. They showed a species that found meaning in struggle itself. Inside the structure, something began to break. The collective intelligence had evolved to be perfectly efficient. Every decision served survival. Every action had clear purpose. But these human memories showed beings who acted without logical reason, who cared for others who could not repay them, who created art that served no function, who trained for years to run slightly faster, gaining no real advantage. The structure is becoming unstable, an alien observer reported, shock clear in their voice. But the humans are not destroying it with weapons. They are destroying it with information. The mission commander floated near the structure's surface, watching as more of her people planted their packages. She knew most of them would not survive the journey back to any pods that remained functional. But that had never been the point of this mission. A young crew member struggled nearby, his suit torn by swarm attacks. He managed to plant his package before the creatures overwhelmed him. His last transmission was simple. Mission complete. The commander closed her eyes for a moment, honoring his sacrifice. Then she continued her own work. Across the dead zone, the swarm began to malfunction. Creatures that had moved in perfect coordination for centuries started acting strangely. Some stopped moving entirely. Others attacked their own kind. The hive mind that had conquered 400 worlds was tearing itself apart. It could not reconcile its programming with the concept of beings who found meaning in struggle. The swarm was built on efficiency, on perfect adaptation, on logical response to threats. But humans were not logical. They were persistent. They failed and tried again. They suffered and kept going. They lost and refused to accept loss as final. An alien military commander watched his displays in disbelief. The swarm is destroying itself. How did the humans know this would work? One of the human survivors, pulled aboard an alien rescue vessel, answered the question. She was missing an arm. Her suit was barely holding pressure, but she was alive and conscious. We knew because we understand something you forgot. The strongest thing in the universe is not the thing that cannot break. It is the thing that breaks and continues anyway. She coughed, pain visible in every movement. The swarm was perfect. It never struggled, never doubted, never faced conflict with itself. It only knew efficiency. So we showed it what happens when perfection meets persistence. We showed it beings who lose and keep fighting, who fail and try again, who break and rebuild. Over the following days, the structure's collapse accelerated. The swarm that had been deemed mathematically impossible to defeat began consuming itself. Its collective intelligence shattered by concepts it could never process. That weakness could be strength. That struggle could have purpose. That surrender was not the only response to overwhelming odds. The surviving humans were recovered by alien vessels. Of the original 200, 41 remained alive. More than 3/4 of the mission personnel were dead. By any normal calculation, the mission had been a disaster, but the dead zone was falling silent. The swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for 6 centuries was collapsing. 400 worlds, written off as permanent losses, could be reclaimed. Billions of people, descendants of those who had been abandoned, could return to their homes. The alien fleet maintained position at the sector's edge, watching something impossible become real. In their different ways, using their various forms of communication, they reached the same conclusion. Humanity had changed the rules, not with better weapons or advanced technology, but with something more fundamental. The absolute refusal to accept that some battles could not be won. The human survivors were taken to medical facilities on the alien ships. The injuries they carried would take months to heal, if they healed at all. Several would never fully recover. But when asked if they regretted volunteering for the mission, every single one said no. One of them, a pilot who had lost both legs when her pod was destroyed, explained it simply. "We came here to show the galaxy what humans are. We did that. The cost was high, but the cost of not trying would have been higher. Those 400 worlds matter. The people there matter. And now they have a chance at life again." The alien doctors struggled to understand this perspective. To them, the mission had traded certain human lives for uncertain alien lives. The mathematics did not balance. But the human pilot just smiled. Mathematics is not everything. Sometimes you have to do what is right, even when the numbers say you should not. Back on Earth, news of the mission's success spread quickly. Celebrations erupted in every city. Humanity had passed the test. They had proven themselves to the galaxy. But amid the celebrations, memorial services were held for the 159 who had not returned. Their names were read aloud in a ceremony. Broadcast across the planet. 159 ordinary people who had done something extraordinary. Engineers and pilots and medics and soldiers. Young and old. From every part of Earth, united by one thing. The refusal to surrender when surrender would have been easier. The human representative, who had stood before the Galactic Federation 3 months ago, attended every memorial service she could. She felt responsible for these deaths. She had challenged the Federation to test humanity. She had known people would die. But knowing it intellectually and facing the reality of empty chairs and grieving families were different things. At one service, an elderly woman approached her. The woman's grandson had died in the final assault on the swarm structure. The representative started to apologize, but the woman stopped her. "Do not apologize," the grandmother said firmly. "My grandson volunteered. He knew the risks. He went anyway because he believes some things are worth dying for. You gave him a chance to matter, to make a difference. Do not diminish his choice by apologizing for it." The representative nodded, understanding but still feeling the weight of responsibility. "You asked them to show the galaxy what humans are," the grandmother continued. "They did. They showed that we do not measure ourselves by whether we avoid death, but by whether we stay true to our purpose. My grandson died doing something impossible. He died proving that impossible is just a word. Similar conversations happened at services across the planet. Families mourning their losses, but also proud of what had been accomplished. It was a uniquely human response, the ability to hold grief and pride in the same moment. The Galactic Federation called another meeting. The human representative returned to that vast conference room, but this time the atmosphere was different. The aliens no longer looked at her with dismissal or amusement. They looked at her with something that might have been respect, or possibly fear, or perhaps both. The crystal being spoke first, its colors shifting through patterns that indicated deep thought. Humanity has completed the test. You succeeded where we failed. The question now is what this means for your application to join the Federation. The representative waited, knowing this was the moment everything had been building toward. We have debated extensively, the crystal being continued. Some argue that humanity is too dangerous, too unpredictable. Others argue that you are exactly what the Federation needs. What we can all agree on is that you have changed something fundamental about how we view the universe. The room fell silent, waiting for the final decision. The crystal being's colors shifted to a deep blue, the shade that indicated important announcements. The Galactic Federation has reached a decision. By majority vote, humanity is accepted as a provisional member. You will have limited voting rights initially, with full membership granted after a probationary period of 10 years. The human representative bowed her head slightly, accepting the terms. It was not everything humanity had hoped for, but it was a beginning. More importantly, it was recognition that humans belonged among the stars. However, the crystal being continued, we must establish clear boundaries. Humanity represents something we have never encountered. A species that attempts the impossible simply because it is impossible. This makes you unpredictable, useful, but also potentially dangerous. We understand, the human replied, and we accept responsibility for our nature. An alien that resembled floating geometric shapes spoke up. We have been studying human history in detail since the Dead Zone mission. We found something that concerns us. Your species has faced multiple extinction events. Climate disasters, diseases that killed millions, wars that destroyed entire regions. Each time, you survived by the smallest margins. The representative nodded. That is true. Humanity has come close to extinction several times. What concerns us, the geometric alien continued, is your response to these near extinctions. Most species become cautious after such trauma. They develop strong risk avoidance. But humans became more aggressive, more willing to take chances. You looked at near extinction and decided to reach for the stars. This is not logical behavior. No, the human agreed. It is not logical, but it is human. We have a term for it: post-traumatic growth. The idea that severe challenges do not just damage us, but can make us stronger if we refuse to surrender to them. The insect-like alien who commanded 40 conquered star systems spoke next. We must ask a difficult question. What happens when humanity encounters a problem that truly cannot be solved? What happens when your persistence meets genuine impossibility? The conference room fell silent. It was the question every alien species wanted answered, but few dared to ask directly. The human representative took her time responding. Then we will fail. We will try everything we can think of, exhaust every option, and ultimately fail. And then we will face the consequences of that failure, learn what we can from it, and continue forward. Because the alternative is surrender. And humans do not surrender. That is precisely what worries us, the crystal being said. A species that refuses to accept reality can be dangerous to itself and others. Reality is not fixed, the human responded quietly. 600 years ago, it was reality that the swarm was unbeatable. The Federation accepted this reality and moved on. We refused to accept it, and we changed what was real. Every major human achievement, from our first controlled fires to our first starships, came from refusing to accept current reality as permanent. She paused, gathering her thoughts. You ask what happens when we face genuine impossibility. But how do we know something is genuinely impossible unless we try? Your species have grown comfortable. You calculate odds and make rational decisions. But rationality has limits. Sometimes the universe requires irrationality. Sometimes progress requires beings who look at 1% odds and say, "So you are telling me there is a chance." A smaller species known for careful diplomacy raised a concern. You lost 159 people in the dead zone. That is nearly 80% casualties. How do you justify such losses? The human's expression grew solemn. We do not justify them. We honor them. Every person who volunteered for that mission knew the odds. They went anyway because they believe some things are worth the risk. 400 worlds are being reclaimed now. Trillions of beings will return to their homes. How do you calculate the value of that? We calculate by logic, the diplomat responded. We determine optimal outcomes based on available data. And if logic says all outcomes are bad? The human asked. What if every calculation shows loss? Do you simply accept the best available defeat? Or do you try anyway, knowing you will probably fail, but refusing to give up without fighting? The conference room erupted in discussion. Different species debated among themselves in languages that range from musical tones to complex, mathematical equations projected as light. Finally, the crystal being called for order. Humanity wishes full integration into the Federation. We have seen what you are capable of in combat. But the Federation is not just a military alliance. It is a coalition of species working together for mutual benefit. How do we know humanity will be a constructive partner in peacetime? The human representative had anticipated this question. Because the same principles that make us effective in war make us valuable in peace. You want to know what human persistence looks like in peacetime? Let me tell you about researchers who spent 50 years developing treatments for diseases that affected only a few thousand people. There was no profit, no strategic advantage. They persisted because those few thousand people mattered. She continued, her voice gaining strength. Let me tell you about teachers who spend entire careers working with students everyone else has given up on. About engineers who volunteer months of their lives to bring clean water to communities they will never meet. About activists who fight for decades to protect environments, knowing they will never see the full results of their work. The representative walked slowly around the chamber. You worry that humans are dangerous because we do not surrender. But that means we also do not surrender on our values, on our commitments, on our partnerships. When humanity joins the Federation, we will bring the same persistence to building and protecting as we brought to fighting the swarm. The ancient alien species that lived for thousands of years spoke for only the second time in the meeting. You paint an idealistic picture. But we have seen your history. Humans fight among yourselves constantly. Your wars have killed billions of your own kind. Yes, the human acknowledged without hesitation. We are not perfect. We are not even close to perfect. We hold grudges. We make terrible mistakes. We let emotions override logic. But we also learn from our failures. Every war taught us something, pushed us to be better. We created laws to protect people. We built institutions to maintain peace. We failed, adapted, and tried again. We are still trying. We will always be trying. The insect the commander made a sound that might have been laughter. So humanity's offer is simple. Ally with a species that refuses to give up, even when giving up is the smart choice. Even when they are fighting themselves. Yes, the human said. That is exactly our offer. We offer imperfect persistence. We offer the species that will never stop working toward better outcomes, even when better seems impossible. The Federation deliberated for hours. The human representative was asked to wait outside the conference room. She stood in a corridor that looked out at the stars, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Finally, she was called back inside. The crystal being spoke for the Federation. Your provisional membership begins immediately. You will have observers in our decision-making processes, but limited voting rights. After 10 years, if humanity has proven itself a reliable partner, full membership will be granted. Do you accept these terms? We do, the human replied. Understand this, the crystal being continued. We are taking a calculated risk. Humanity might attempt things simply because they are difficult. This makes you unpredictable, but it also makes you potentially valuable. The galaxy has grown comfortable. Perhaps it needs a species that still remembers how to struggle. As the meeting concluded and species began to depart, the insect commander approached the human privately. A question. When you first stood before us, you told us about humans who fight silent battles, about everyday persistence. Did you truly believe that would convince us? The representative smiled. I told the truth. The battles that forge real heroes are not always fought with weapons. They are fought in hospitals and schools and laboratories. They are fought by people who wake up every day and choose to continue despite every reason to quit. The Dead Zone mission was impressive, but it was just one example of what humans do constantly on personal battlefields you will never see. The commander's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. My species conquered 40 star systems through military might. We thought this made us strong. But watching your people, I wonder if we confuse strength with power. Power is the ability to win. Strength is the ability to keep fighting even when you cannot win. Then you understand us better than most, the human said as she left the Federation chambers. The representative thought about the 41 survivors of the Dead Zone mission. They were scattered across human space now, recovering from injuries, reintegrating into regular life. Most would never speak publicly about what they had done. They would become teachers, parents, workers, living ordinary lives. But they would always know, as would every human, that when faced with the impossible, humanity's answer was simple. Try anyway. That was the truth that would define humanity's place among the stars. Not superior technology, not advanced evolution, not any natural advantage. Just the absolute, stubborn refusal to surrender, even when surrender was the rational choice. Especially then,